Hello, everybody. This is Brian Ankney with AutoSuccess magazine. Hey, I really appreciate you all taking the time to join us today. Today's webinar, we're going to discuss how to convert more of your existing unique visitors into car buyers. I'm very pleased to have Devin Daly, the CEO of SpinCar, on with me today. Before we get started, a couple of things I'd like to go over. If you haven't yet, please join AutoSuccess webinars. It's a group on Facebook, and when you join the group, you'll be able to interact with our speakers. You'll be able to suggest, future topics and/or speakers that you'd like for us to have on. And most importantly, in addition to that, on these webinars, we cover a lot of really kind of in-depth tech. A lot of it's really technology involved, multiple step, new processes you're going to use at your dealership, and so you're going to have successes and failures, just like everybody else who's on the call. So please, feel free to share your successes and failures. Ask questions of others that are trying to implement the same changes that you are at your store. We want to have a community there where we can all help each other improve our businesses. Now, with questions, if you're on a PC or a laptop, look to the right side of your screen. There's the GoToWebinar panel. Near the bottom, you'll see questions. Right next to the questions is a plus sign. Click the plus sign, and you're able to type in any questions that you might have during the webinar. We will address all of them. Also, in addition to that pane, if you're on a smartphone, so if you're on an Android or an Apple, it's either going to be at the top or the bottom of your screen. You're going to just see a question mark, and by clicking that, that'll allow you to type in questions. As I mentioned before, today's guest is Devin Daly, and he's going to present to us how to convert more of your existing unique visitors into car buyers. Devin, my friend, please take it away.
Absolutely, and thank you, Brian. Really been a pleasure working with you so far, and thank you for facilitating this. So I guess before we get started, I'd love to, if anybody wants to chat in where they're from, so I have an idea of, what the mix of dealerships versus OEM attendees versus vendors in the space. I think that'd be really helpful. And, we generally find it interesting because we can reference, dealerships that we work with or vendors that we work with. So if you guys don't mind, just, chat in, what part of the country you're in and where you're from. So, and thank you again, everybody, for attending. Obviously, it's a Thursday before the long Labor Day weekend, so I do appreciate your time and attention. I'll try to keep this today shorter than 1 hour. It'll probably be somewhere kind of in the 30 to 40 minute range, so I just wanted to give everybody kind of a heads up on that. And we'll talk a bit today about conversion rates and kind of how you measure that stuff, measure your website effectiveness. We'll then talk about some quick things that you can do to improve how your website's performing and improve some of your BDC processes. Then we'll talk about this really kind of unprecedented new data technique that allows us to track things more accurately and market one-to-one. And lastly, we'll go over what we call at SpinCar a CMO dashboard, and how we think this can be used to improve dealership operations. Because we have kind of these four main things that we're going to discuss, I prefer, honestly, to keep it conversational. So at various points throughout, I'll ask for questions. Feel free to chat those in. I'll switch back to the GoToWebinar pane and see what questions have been chatted in. Again, because there's so many different sort of topics, they're kind of compartmentalized. I prefer to sort of have Q&A after each of those different kind of sections is discussed, so that we're not referencing something from the beginning of the presentation at the end, because again, we're going to cover such a wide span. So I guess before we jump into it, though, I'll give you guys a little bit about my background, because I do think it's pertinent to what we're going to talk about today. Unlike a lot of folks in the automotive industry, I don't come from kind of an auto background whatsoever. I come from a traditional finance background, so I started my career on Wall Street. And then we get into private equity, so we were buying later stage companies. And then I got into venture capital, where we were investing in early stage companies. And then for the last 5 years or so, we've consulted with high-end, well, not just high-end, but all sorts of different e-commerce companies. Companies very traditional like Louis Vuitton, brick and mortar background, to companies very disruptive like Warby Parker. And one of the things that we noticed, and the reason that we've been focused on auto for the last couple of years, is we think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that dealers can really harvest and take advantage of. When we look at this kind of all-encompassing metric that we look at, which is the conversion rate of unique visitors to units sold in automotive, that ratio is a lot higher than in other considered purchase sectors like real estate. And we think that's because dealers focus, our kind of general thesis is that dealers focus too much on putting more into the top of the funnel. And I don't know if that's in some cases egotism, and in some cases the OEMs are sort of pushing the dealerships to spend more to get the brand out there. And we find that the best way to lower marketing spend per vehicle, increase profitability, is to focus on plugging leaks in the funnel and not dumping more unique visitors in the top. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and that's where the kind of title comes from. And so we've done these sorts of engagements, and we've helped a lot of other brands outside of automotive. And I think it's interesting, we can bring some of those best practices, some of those techniques into the auto space. So long story short, I think we have a unique kind of vantage point on this industry. So that's where we're going to kind of start, is talking about measurement, conversion rate, etc. So before we get into actually diving deeper in this thing, let's talk quickly about measurement. There's a famous quote by management guru Peter Drucker, who I'm sure most of the folks on this call have heard of. The quote is, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And again, having that kind of VC private equity background, I firmly believe in that. We force all the CEOs that we invest in to produce weekly reports, and the impact that has, just forcing somebody to go through that process of actually reporting on whatever KPIs you define or they define, naturally forces people to pay closer attention. You'll naturally see those things go up. And so this is what we call a Vdp Metrics Dashboard, and what this is essentially our suggested set of KPIs that a dealership asks their BDC person, their internet manager, etc., to track and send to them on a weekly or biweekly or semi-weekly or monthly basis. And again, just that sort of process of forcing them on Friday afternoons or Monday mornings to send it to you for the week prior, even if you don't open it, just that process, forcing them to go through that, you'll see a significant increase in most of these KPIs. And so we'll go through and we'll talk about them kind of one by one. So essentially the way that this functions, and this is something we give to dealers completely free of charge. If you guys would like this, just email us. You can email Kia. It's just kia@spincar.com. She's the admin here, just Kia, K-I-A, like the car brand, @spincar.com, and we'll send this to you guys, free of charge. But we'll go through this and kind of talk about each one of these different KPIs or conversions. So the way this functions is up at the top, you plug in all the data. So those are kind of your absolute numbers, unique visitors, VDP, etc. And then the second block, if you will, conversions, will auto-populate based on those numbers that are plugged in up at the top. So there's only 8 or whatever variables that your internet manager would need to plug in. So let's jump down to the conversion section, and that's what we're going to kind of talk about. The reason we focus so much on conversion is that we think that's really kind of the highest leverage place that a dealership can focus. I know there's been some talk recently, like traditionally Tier 1 would focus on branding, Tier 2 on education, Tier 3 on conversion, and now there's been some talk more recently that dealerships at the Tier 3 level need to focus more on branding and education, and frankly, we at SpinCar at least vehemently disagree with that and think that dealerships still should focus purely on conversion. How do I take X number of unique visitors and convert it into X number of cars sold, and how do I drive that second number up is really what we think dealerships should be focused on, as opposed to educating consumers about the brand in their particular market. So we'll talk about conversions. First of all, VDP visitor per unique visitor. So we'll go through these, and the reason that we track this so granularly is that's really how you're going to understand the user flows and where there are flaws and where there's room for improvement and what's doing well. So this may seem like almost micromanaged with how granularly we're tracking this, but we think this is important. So VDP visitors per unique visitor. This essentially tracks how effectively is your homepage converting people and pushing them into product pages, pushing them into the VDP pages. Some things that, if this number is unusually low, some things that you might look at is, like, for example, and we'll talk a little about web design later in the presentation, for example, maybe your header on your dealership's website is so large that they don't really even see the specials or whatever you're intending people to see on your homepage. If the header with your logo and with the kind of menu bar, etc., is taking up 3/4 of the page on a desktop, that's usually a bad thing for converting people from unique visitors into VDP visitors. But again, this metric sort of tracks, is my homepage getting people to the VDPs? Do I have my specials highlighted? Is it meaningful? Are the calls to action clear, etc.? Lead submissions per VDP visitor. This is bolded or emboldened because this is obviously sort of that famous conversion rate that people talk about on their website. So how effectively is my VDP page converting somebody into a lead? So are my call to actions good? Are my lead forms good? Are they above the fold? Is it easy enough to fill out? Am I asking for any unnecessary information? There's a lot of things there. Next is click to calls per unique visitor, so kind of like lead submissions per unique visitor, but obviously on mobile this is more prevalent. So those are kind of website metrics. Then we'll talk about a couple BDC metrics, so calls to appointments set. So obviously that's how effective is somebody at, when somebody calls in, how effective are they at setting that appointment? Are they selling the appointment? Again, we're going to talk a little bit about that later. Appointments set per lead submission. So this is slightly different than calls to appointment set in that this is somebody that doesn't call in but submits a lead. So things like response time are factored in here. Demos per appointment set. So demos per appointment set, are they actually showing up? Are they building enough value in the appointment? Are you reminding them properly? And again, we're going to go into ways to improve all this stuff. Closes per demo, this is your very typical salesperson close rate. And then closes per unique visitor. Again, that's that kind of all-encompassing umbrella metric that we sort of, use as our KPI when we engage with the dealership. How many actual car deals are you getting out of your 5,000 unique visitors? And again, if we can look to drive that number up so that it goes from 200 cars to 500 cars, and you have a 10-to-1 ratio as opposed to 25-to-1 ratio, you're going to see marketing costs per vehicle sold go down dramatically. Unique visitors per close is obviously just the inverse of that. VDP views per user. This essentially tracks how many VDPs does the average person go to. This is not a conversion rate, but this is a metric that CDK did a thing called Automotive Moneyball, and they looked at what were the two best predictors of online sales. And what they found was it was VDPs per user, and it was time on VDP. And so we suggest tracking that. But VDP views per user, a lot of dealers, when we talk, they don't really understand why necessarily this is important. What this does, like let's say you go to a restaurant for the Friday night prime rib, and you're going there for that sole reason. But then you end up enjoying the ambiance and the sort of experience of the restaurant so much that you come back to it 5 more times in the next month. That's the same kind of concept. If I come to your website because I've fallen in love with one vehicle that I see in a third-party site, but I end up coming back because I enjoy the way that you present your vehicles and your inventory, that's a really good indicator that you've created an enjoyable experience. And so that kind of covers most of those metrics that we recommend looking at. There's also obviously bounce rate up above, which we can talk about some ways to reduce later in the presentation. But again, we suggest just simply asking your internet manager to produce this on, let's say every Monday morning at 9 a.m. have this on my desk. Quickly review it. Maybe have a 15-minute stand-up meeting. And again, I think you'll learn things. A lot of dealerships don't really hold their BDC or internet departments accountable. We think you'll learn things about, kind of about the internet performance and about your website that you otherwise wouldn't. So I guess any questions on that before we kind of move on? Hang on one sec. I'm just going to pop over to this screen so I can see them.
Yeah, actually, I have one question that somebody chatted in. What do you see as a good VDP conversion rate?
Sure. Yeah. So VDP conversion rate, a lot of times we're looking, I think our average dealership's at about 1.67%. And we're looking to get dealerships up into the 2% range. And while that may sound minimal in terms of kind of, you're only moving at 0.4% or 0.33% or whatever that number is, when you think about having such a large unique visitor pool, it actually makes quite the impact in terms of, car deals and total gross profit to the dealership. So, if you can get up above 2%, that's really a good place to be, 2, 2.5, et cetera. So that's really what we look for. Great question.
I've got one more for you. What percentage of dealerships do you think are using this type of a report right now?
Yeah, good question. When we engage with them, and I don't think, I think, we have like 1,500 dealerships or something like that under sort of contract. So I think we have a fair sampling of the U.S. market. I would say very few. Most track like 1 or 2 main KPIs in their BDC department or their internet department. They'll track total lead submissions and maybe conversion rate. But again, I think it's important to get as granular as you can because I think you understand a lot more. Like a lot of dealerships make the mistake of tracking total internet lead submissions just in absolute terms, which in a vacuum like that doesn't have much value because you're not even looking at the conversion rate. and you're not looking at like, oh, I spent 50 grand this month in additional TV spend and got way more unique visitors. So we suggest really, implementing this kind of process. And again, it shouldn't take somebody more than, 10 or 15 minutes to go into their Google Analytics and maybe, whatever their CRM is and kind of fill this thing out. So that looks like all the questions I have. Thank you guys for great questions. Appreciate it. So we'll jump back into things. And so, we talked about first was kind of the way to track these different metrics. Now what we'll talk about is quick and easy ways to implement or things to implement to improve some of these metrics. And what we'll do is we'll kind of go through them and I'll talk through them, and then we'll jump over and we'll actually show some live examples out on the internet. So the first thing we suggest is getting vehicle details above the fold. And I sort of alluded to this earlier on the home page when I was talking about looking at your unique visitors to your Vdp visitor conversion rate. What we often find is that dealerships have so much of the valuable information about the vehicle down below the fold. And for anyone that's not familiar with that, when you think of the newspaper, the most valuable information is on the top of the newspaper, below the actual physical fold. On the website, the concept of the fold is like when somebody loads your website up on a desktop or on a mobile device, where is kind of that first screen? Where's the line where they would have to scroll to see anything below it? And we recommend getting as much vehicle details up above the fold. And if you can use graphical elements, we all know people don't like to read. If you can use graphical elements, we firmly suggest that too. Number two, which is sort of related or tangential to that, whatever's actually unique about that vehicle. So if it has the cold weather package, and that's a $6,000 package, or if it has let's say some aftermarket enhancement that's really valuable, whatever makes it special compared to all the other competing vehicles on the third-party sites, when somebody filters down, make that really clear to the consumer so that they realize, okay, even though this vehicle's $1,200 more than the other vehicles that I saw on the third-party sites, it has the cold weather package, and that's an MSRP of $6,000, so this is actually a better deal. We think a lot of dealerships' websites fail in making that stuff clear. Third thing is to provide an interactive experience. So, today's world, people are reading 60-character tweets, and, a world of information is available literally at their fingertips on a mobile device. People want to be able to interact and get to what they want to sort of find out as quickly and easily as possible. They want to drive their own experience and create their own kind of online shopping experience. And so any way that you can build in interactivity, we think has a lot of value. Using high-res zoom and pan photos, this is a super actionable one in that, like, a lot of dealerships will spend a lot of money on a DSLR camera or a nice point-and-shoot or a nice mobile device, and they'll shoot at 20 megapixels, but then their feed providers will de-res the photos down to like 480 by 260, and like it almost renders all of that really nice equipment that you bought useless or valueless. And so there's an easy workaround for this. You can simply ask the feed provider that on your home website if you could have those uploaded at full resolution, and then when they actually syndicate them out or send them out, they can de-res them because they typically won't send out high-resolution photos. This is an easy fix, and you can, if you have any issue, you can work with us, and we've got kind of an easy workaround that we can suggest if any feed provider does deny this. But any dealer that we work with, this is kind of a first step that we do is help them get set up with their higher-res photos, because even if you're just using a very low-end camera, it's still producing photos that are much higher resolution than what feed providers typically de-res them to. We think transparency is key. So again, this is right on your website. Be more transparent. If it's a one-accident vehicle, for example, we'd suggest calling that out as opposed to inciting rage when somebody gets there and sees the Carfax. Or if there's a small dent or ding, and we can show you, how we do this. But our thought here is, like, if you think about like the different environments that you create, whether you're fully transparent and consultative versus not being transparent and potentially even sort of shrouding something, it's two extremely different selling environments and negotiating environments. Like, at the end of the day, I don't necessarily know that if you're being really consultative on a $30,000 vehicle, if somebody's going to beat you up over that $500 or $600, because to the consumer it doesn't necessarily have that much of an impact, but to a dealership, that extra $500 in gross that can make a ton of money at the end of the year. And so, we think being transparent can increase gross profit because you create that more transparent consultative selling environment. The last thing, which is something that this is another kind of quick takeaway that we saw when we sort of moved from e-commerce, is that a lot of dealerships use very rudimentary retargeting engines, and they often don't spend enough in retargeting. Like obviously your retargeting is capped by the number of unique visitors that you get to your website. It's called retargeting because you only target users that have already been to your site. And so you can't spend a lot of money, like a ton of money in retargeting, but what we see is dealers artificially capping their retargeting spend, which in e-commerce that was never even heard of. There was no such thing as a retargeting budget in e-commerce. It was always spend as much as you could based on your unique visitor count, because that is the highest leverage marketing channel that exists across the board in any industry. So that would be kind of the last one. And so what we'll do here is we'll flip over and I'll show you guys some examples of like getting details about folds, interactive experience, etc. Oops, do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at kind of a website that we think is doing it wrong and compare that to a website that we think is doing it right. So, we talk about kind of getting those vehicle details above the fold. This is kind of an example. So here you've got all these vehicle details down below the fold. And so like anything that's potentially unique about this vehicle, as you can see when I'm here, I don't see any of those vehicle details. And so I scroll here and I still don't see them, and I think this is all I get. Nobody really makes it clear to me what's unique about this vehicle. We suggest getting these up above the fold, and we'll show you how. The other thing that I see wrong here is like this is completely unprioritized, uncategorized, unalphabetized sort of VIN vomit, if you will. It's like a VIN decoding just splurge of information. And there's no real way, like let's say I'm buying this vehicle, but I want to make sure that I get the one that has side curtain airbags. There's no way for me to quickly get to that information. I can scroll through and read every one, which it's unlikely that'll do. Or if I know how to use Control F, I can try to find it using that. But I mean, it's really just not an enjoyable experience. And this is where I was going to come back to bounce rates. HubSpot did a study. HubSpot's really kind of like the quintessential thought leader when it comes to online marketing, digital marketing, and website design. And what they found, the two largest drivers of bounce rates where a website was difficult to use and where a website made it arduous to find the information that a consumer was looking for. Well, it's very difficult for me to find out if this has side curtain airbags. So what am I going to do? It's the largest driver of bounce rate. I'm going to bounce from the site and go to another one that makes it clearer. Compare that with a dealer who we think is doing it right. So as you can see, they're getting all their vehicle details up above the fold. So all the details are up here. You can very quickly get to whatever you're interested in. So I want to know, for example, does this thing have, let's say, like cruise control? Okay, it does. Does it have like parking aid? Oh, it does. Great, I'm right here. This is all up above the fold. It's in a very sort of intuitive fashion. It's a very interactive experience. Same thing, if I want to know, okay, does this vehicle have, let's say, trunk space? What's the trunk space look like on this vehicle? I can get in, I'm done, it's quick, it's easy, it's over. I don't need to scan through, I don't have to read a lot. It's very interactive, it's very intuitive. And so that's kind of the thing. Or like here, for example, does it have like that new safety feature, for example? They can click in, they can get the video on it. And again, that whole idea of being transparent, here's a dent that's tagged in this vehicle. So I know this this dealer is being transparent with me and is willing to, disclose any issues that are wrong with this vehicle. So again, talking about improving website efficiency and, driving higher conversions, we think kind of those 6 tips: get vehicle details above the fold, make special features about that vehicle clear, use zoom and pan photographs, so let the consumer actually zoom in on what they're interested in. Again, be transparent, and again, use retargeting. We'll talk a little bit more about retargeting later. Here are some other things to look at. This is a study that was done by Dominion, completely independent of SpinCar. They looked at 4,500 dealers and I think like 600,000 vehicles or something like that. And they looked at what's the impact on turn rate of various different merchandising solutions. And these were kind of the results. I can chat this out, or Key, if you could chat that out and just send everybody kind of in the chat here. But this is an interesting thing to look at is, what's the impact on turn rates by looking at different merchandising solutions. And again, I think that's because we as dealers have such high unique visitor pools that if we can improve our website conversion rates, it's not only going to drive more leads, it's also going to increase turn rates dramatically. So I think that's another thing to look at. let me jump back to the deck now. So beyond website metrics, we also, obviously in that sort of VDP dashboard, we also talked about some BDC metrics. So how do I improve my BDC metrics? Here are 3 quick ways. The first thing that we suggest is using data to have a custom conversation with leads. This is an example. This is what's called the lead intelligence report, where I know every feature that a consumer spent time looking at. So that means if Brian, for example, spent a bunch of time looking at the M package spec sheet, reading about the 0 to 60 time, and then clicked on, the engine to get a close-up on the engine, I get that information submitted to me right in my CRM, and I'm able to have a conversation with Brian and say, hey, Brian, I saw I submitted a lead on that M5. I don't know if you got a chance to really read through and figure out exactly what's included in that M package, but it's got, a turbocharger, it's got enhanced suspension, it's got enhanced dual exhaust. I already know that Brian spent time looking at that, and so I'm able to have a kind of affirmative conversation that I custom tailored to him, as compared to, like, let's say Kia, for example, spent a bunch of time reading the IIHS safety rating. She clicked on the side curtain airbags and then read about, the crash test results, for example. When I talk to Kia, I can say, hey, I saw you submitted a lead on that X5. I'm not sure if you knew this or not, but this got the highest IIHS safety rating in its class. I already know that she spent time on that. I already know, and it's going to resonate with her, so I can be, the expert on the product, because again, we know that that's what she really seems to care about. So that's the first thing, is whatever data you have, use that to have a custom conversation. Way, way, way too many dealers that we talk to have a very simple BDC talk track. Hey, I saw you submitted a lead. When would be a good time for you to come down and take a test drive? And that's pretty much it. No building value, no customization based on what they spent time on. So this, we think, is a really easy way to improve it. Second, remind them. Obviously, I may be sort of strange in that I live and die by my Google Calendar. Like, literally, I've missed like countless events with significant others and family members because I didn't have a calendar invite in place. And I know that I'm probably sort of way on one end of the spectrum there, but we think just reminding people, send out the calendar invite, send the quick reminder text or reminder email. Get someone's phone number, just shoot them a text, make that part of your BDC process. That's incredibly important to driving that appointment set to actual demo rate up. And it's really simple. Hey, do you mind just grabbing his email and, at the end of every call, just send them out a calendar invite with whatever time. You don't want to be annoying, but I think that that's kind of a nice gesture that any dealership can implement really easily. It's super easy. Third thing is just taking that consultative approach to trying to build value. Be the expert on the vehicle and sort of sell the appointment. You want to establish yourself and your dealership as experts on these vehicles in order to, really encourage them to come down, especially your dealership versus another dealership. So, being consultative about it. Again, not just, hey, I saw someone to lead, when's a good time, but, consult them about the vehicle. Oh, cool. So does the M5 is what you're really looking for? Because I could have a couple other cars out front to test drive with you. The 5 Series can be a little bit, maybe the legroom can be a little tight. Do you have kids, if you don't mind me asking? You plan on carting around kids quite a bit? Well, you might want to look at the X5 or the 7 Series then, or what have you. So, that would be our suggestion there, is just to try to take that consultative approach right at the BDC department level. So, again, I think now that we've covered kind of those 6 ways to improve conversion rates on your website and the 3 ways to improve BDC metrics, we'll pause for any questions on that stuff. So I'll zip back here and see if anybody asked any.
Actually, Devin, a couple of them come in. For retargeting, should we just show vehicle or dealership advantages?
Just show vehicles or dealership. I missed the last word.
Oh, like dealership advantages? I'm guessing like, kind of like evidence of why you'd want to do business with that dealership?
Yeah, no, we think that has a ton of value. I mean, just like, vehicle photograph overlays, we think definitely include the advantage. And there's a lot of, retargeting engines that can sort of place that in the header, or, there's probably space to do it where you can still have a nice big vehicle hero shot, whatever image that person spent the most time on, the 3/4 driver's side. And you could probably still, based on just thinking about ad design here, because what I see a lot of dealerships do, the reason my mind goes here is what I see a lot of dealerships do is they have these teeny tiny little photographs because they have all this text and white space in the ad, and you can barely even see the vehicle, which is the product. You know, the car is the star, right? But I think with, you know, a dealership advantage, you can include that down in kind of the header or the footer near where your logo goes. So yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a big difference.
Okay. Are you saying to disclose a multiple accident vehicle above the fold?
You know, accident vehicles are a very interesting. They're very interesting pieces of inventory. What we find is that dealerships that acquire accident vehicles, they can often drive quite a bit of traffic. Because if you think about the general way that somebody filters, like they want to buy a certified pre-owned 5 Series BMW, and you know they want to filter from lowest price to highest under 30,000 miles, let's say. What's going to come up first are accident vehicles. So they can get a lot of traffic. So that's interesting. You know, I don't know that I have necessarily a firm belief on whether that should be kind of called out, or whether that should be, you know, just made available through kind of a Carfax or AutoCheck sort of widget. What you obviously don't want to do is claim that it's got a clean Carfax, or sort of imply that it has a very clean Carfax when in reality it doesn't. You know, there's some cool stuff. Obviously, you guys are probably more familiar than I am that Carfax has come out with that'll match incident reports, so Carfax vehicle accident reports, back with a police report, so that if it really was just, you know, you backed into a bush, or a trailer, you know, came off the truck or whatever, the trailer had an accident, the vehicle's actually okay, that you can really become extremely transparent with that. But, you know, I know some dealers that really successfully leverage accident vehicles to drive a lot more traffic, because again, you can get somebody into some of those luxury vehicles for a much lower price if there's, you know, maybe an accident on it. So again, I don't necessarily have strong feelings about like super sort of clearly disclosing that it's been in a couple accidents versus, you know, just providing the information and showing the consumer that you did if anything does come back, and sort of defending your position of transparency. But either way, you know, I think far few dealers stray completely away from accident vehicles when there can be a lot of value in them.
Okay. How does that spin hotspot display work that you showed us?
Oh, sure. So yeah, so essentially there's a mobile application that you can use to capture your inventory. So that's kind of what this is it kind of steps you through kind of the photography process at your dealership.
Just 2 minutes.
Power this down. But essentially you take a walk around the vehicle, and it captures a video, captures that spin, captures those hot spots, extracts all the photos that are needed. It takes about 90 seconds to kind of fully merchandise that vehicle. And so that's kind of how it works. And then it obviously gets displayed up on the VDP pages.
Okay. What are the unique features to highlight?
Yeah, so that can kind of, that's sort of determined by the dealership, right? So a dealership can say, okay, my demographic, and you guys are seeing what's on my right side here on my YouTube suggested pages. I have no idea what could possibly be here. So anyway, it's probably a bad practice on a webinar. So anything can kind of be, you know, displayed in that. That can be decided by the dealership. Like if they say my demographic is primarily family buyers, so I want to highlight things like safety, etc. Or like we have a relevancy engine, so we get about 8 million uniques a month across our network of dealerships and third-party websites in the U.S. alone. And so we've got this huge database that says when people click on cooled seats, they tend to submit leads higher than if they click on some other unique selling feature. And so what we can do is we can ingest a VIN, and we can output what we consider kind of the 5 is kind of the magic number, or maybe 3 exterior, 3 interior things that we have found through, again, this 8 million uniques a month database that we've developed, what is unique and what has the most value and is the most likely to convert. But that can be bolstered by information from the dealership. So like, oh, by the way, a lot of people are buying Terrains because they found out that it did really well in the front-end crash test rating. So, you know, can you also include that and prioritize that? And so that's, again, that's sort of partially very quantitative and a little bit qualitative, or a little bit anecdotal, to answer your question. Great question, though.
Okay. Well, it looks like that's what we've got for right now. If you want to just continue.
Cool, cool. All righty. So what we're going to talk about now, kind of shifting gears or moving on a bit, is kind of one-to-one marketing. And, you know, I think what we've noticed, right, is like in the early 90s, it was kind of a spray and pray approach to e-commerce. It was, you know, buy a list or develop some kind of list and send it out to, you know, 9 million people and send the same message to everyone and hope that people kind of, you know, come in and, you know, submit leads or buy from your store or what have you. And, you know, probably in the last 10 years, it's gone to, you know, one to few. So you try to profile people. So this person falls in kind of the pet buyer bucket. This guy falls in the outdoorsman bucket. This kid falls in the, you know, child sports bucket, etc. And what that was called is, you know, kind of one to few marketing. So you're trying to bucket them based on buying trends, demographics, where do they live, you know, what's their income, etc. What we're seeing now is real, and it's really exciting, is real one-to-one marketing. And you can see an example of this. If you go to Walmart.com, go to their homepage, and we've done some business with Walmart, so we're intimately familiar. You go to their homepage, and you load up the homepage, and let's say that you're a father, you'll see stuff about grilling, Labor Day weekend sales, etc. Who knows what it'll actually be? I'm just an example. And then have your significant other, or if you have kids, or, you know, if you have a family member that's close by, have them do it, ideally on, you know, a unique device where you wouldn't be sharing cookies, maybe their mobile device, and it'll be a completely different experience. But that's a great example of one-to-one marketing and changing the consumer experience based on whom that person is. And so that's what we see happening, right, is all these marketers are beginning to market one-to-one because you find that, you know, response rates and conversion rates are so much higher. And there's two reasons that we're able to do that for the first time ever. The first is because of consumer interaction data. So better profiling data. And that's kind of what we talked about with that lead intelligence report, that data about what features did Brian click on versus Kia. For the first time, we can track that to make decisions. So we're no longer making a guess about what you care about based on how much you spend at Walmart each year. We now know that every time that you look at a vehicle, you're spending time looking at performance-centric stats. So again, it's much more accurate and it's much less of a guess or a leap of faith. And then the second thing is we have unprecedented propensity to purchase data available to us as automotive marketers. So, you know, for the first time, we can really, what is somebody's propensity to purchase? So is it just a 13-year-old looking at cool Ferraris, or is it somebody that got in an accident 7 days ago and needs a new vehicle as soon as possible because they had a total loss? So we can, for the first time, really tell that. And so what we'll jump into here is kind of some examples of retargeting done the incorrect way versus what we consider kind of the correct way. So this, for example, on the left is what we call static retargeting. As you can see, what I mentioned previously, the image of the vehicle is teeny, teeny, tiny, and it's a stock image of the vehicle. I mean, you're pretty much at this point promoting not your dealership, you're pretty much promoting the OEM. But again, you can barely even see that. It's not the exact vehicle that you looked at. It's a stock photo of a vehicle that maybe you looked at something in that class. And this is a huge, huge mistake in my opinion, because what we find, like Amazon obviously is the expert at this stuff. We've all shopped on Amazon, I'm sure, and then you go to Facebook or you go to, you know, whatever, you're reading the news somewhere, or, you know, you're on a finance site or what have you, and you get retargeted with that same product that you looked at. The reason that works so well is because that same image resonates with you. It catches your eye. Otherwise, you know, we've all been trained to just totally dismiss display ads, but with retargeting, it catches our eye because we've seen that exact vehicle or that exact product before. So if you use a stock photo, that whole you know, sort of bait is lost. So that's sort of the first issue that we take with kind of these static retargeting ads. The second thing is that it's not personalized based on consumer behavior. On the right side, we have an example that's what we call dynamic retargeting. So it's not only the vehicle that they looked at, it's the exact photo that they spent the most time looking at, and we're actually calling out the feature that they seem most interested in based on their behavior on your site. So again, a lot of times this can be a deal breaker, right? Like I had a convertible and I would drive it around, but it didn't have cooled seats. Despite not having a top, it was almost unbearable, even with the air conditioning cranked. And so I said, you know, I definitely want cooled seats. It's a bad example because we're talking about a Yukon here, but the idea is like I would never buy another vehicle without cooled seats. And so that's really a deal breaker for me. And so highlighting that, oh wow, that has it, great. Click back and you're right back into that sort of, right back onto that vehicle again, right back onto that dealership site. Here's another example. So again, you've got the kind of static example on your left, and then on the right here we have, you're calling out the horsepower because you know that this guy's an engine buyer. You're showing the photo that he spent the most time looking at, which is the engine photo, no surprise. You're making it really clear that, this is a performance-centric vehicle because he's the guy that spent all the time looking at performance-centric features. And I mentioned something earlier that I want to flesh out a little bit because I think this is kind of the last example of retargeting. Here's an example in Facebook too. This is super powerful. I actually just read a great book about sort of Facebook's ad journey, and they didn't really see much performance, and now they've sort of cracked that nut, which is why the stock is really just on such a tear. They have incredible ad performance now. Before, their click-through rates and their CPC was bad. Now it's really, really strong, and we see dealerships that are getting 50, 60 leads just from Facebook retargeting, and that's because, if you have somebody, they can comment, they can engage, they can share. You can get a lot of kind of social momentum or kind of build a social echo chamber through Facebook retargeting. So we firmly, firmly suggest that you use a retargeting engine that's capable of doing this. One thing I was going to mention, though, or flesh out, which I mentioned earlier, is that retargeting is sort of unequivocally the highest leverage ad channel, and that's pretty clear, across any industry. And the reason for that, if you think about the typical consumer buying path, I come to, let's back up a second. I end up on your dealership's website through whatever medium I end up getting there through, and I'm shopping and I start to fall in love with the vehicle and I'm 4 minutes in, and then what do I think? I think, oh, I should go to Edmunds and see how they reviewed this vehicle before I submit a lead on it. As soon as you leave that site and you go to a third-party research site, what happens? All the competition buys that person's information and starts serving them ads. If you retarget them, though, you're willing to pay more because that person's been to your site already and get them back to your site and get them re-shopping on your site. Because the problem is if they leave, they're not going to remember whose site they were on, frankly, a lot of times at least, especially if they're shopping more kind of on a third-party comparison basis. And they're also, what was I going to say? They're going to restart their search process, so they're going to refilter, go back through it, and your opportunity to win that person back is much, much lower than if you retarget them. So that, again, I just wanted to flesh out why we say that that's the highest ROI channel. Any questions on kind of retargeting stuff before we kind of move on to the last part here? I just want to kind of keep moving, but any questions?
Actually, how do you get the data in what you call the lead intelligence report?
Great question. So we track people's interactions with the vehicle. So what features are they clicking on, what features are they spending a lot of time on, what features are they re-clicking on, and then we automatically append that to the lead form. So we automatically include that with the lead form, so it flows right into the dealership's CRM. So as I'm working through, a list of leads, I land on, let's say, Brian's lead, and I see, okay, click here for lead intelligence report. I click, and I see, okay, Brian spent much time on the engine, the M5 package, and the 0 to 60 time and other spec sheets. And so it's right in the CRM, so it's integrated into the workflow.
Okay. How does it? I guess you kind of touched on the answer to this next question, but how does the dealer access the data in the lead intelligence report?
Yeah, yep. So it comes right into the CRM, so it flows right into the comment section of the CRM as a clickable link. So it's just a URL that it's anonymized, obviously, because we all know how consumer data can get a little bit hairy. So it's perfectly anonymized, but you just click and it's assigned to that particular lead. So it's just right in the comment section. So if they ask, when does the warranty expire on this vehicle, right below that it'll say click here for link to lead intelligence report right in the comment section of the CRM.
Do you have specific recommendations on the photography process for vehicles?
Definitely. We recommend, so full disclosure, it's tough. I want to keep this educational, but at the same time, this is a tough one for me to kind of beat around the bush. We have an application that essentially is a forced march and takes people through the photography process that we have found using, again, that 8 million unique visitor per month database that we have, what exact images convert the best and create the best user experience and, create the highest customer satisfaction and drive the most leads. And so, we have an application that essentially, in a much more efficient fashion, allow somebody to photograph a vehicle and we extract all the photos from that video. That would be kind of my suggestion is, and there's another couple apps out there to try to keep this educational, but we'd suggest doing that because number one, it keeps it consistent. Number two, there's specific images that are like outlined in there that are proven to convert at a higher rate. And number three, if somebody calls in sick or they quit the dealership, somebody else is able to pick up that application and continue with the process without skipping a beat. So that would be my suggestion.
All right. Well, looks like that's all we've got for this section.
Cool. Cool. So last thing we'll talk about is what we call a CMO dashboard. And so again, we recommend that dealers that aren't already using the VDP or something like it implement that and then kind of grow to sort of go through this process. But essentially, this looks at, in a very, very granular fashion, how much are you spending, what's your marketing attribution per channel, etc. And again, this might be a little bit more advanced, so a lot will start with that VDP dashboard and then move into this. But we have some dealers that started with our VDP dashboard 90 days later, they literally, using Google Analytics event tracking, and they have unique landing pages, they can literally attribute every car deal to a lead source no matter what, and can assign an accurate marketing cost to sell that vehicle. That's really, when you can get to that level, that's really strong stuff, and you'll feel really in control of your business because, again, you know exactly how much you spent on each channel and exactly what it produced in terms of gross profit. You know what to cut, you know what to spend more on, you know what to double or triple or quadruple down on. And you for the first time, you really understand what levers can be pulled and where should you hit the accelerator, where should you hit the brakes, etc. Not to use too many car puns, but so what this does is, again, you punch in all your different lead sources: so TV, radio, newspaper, third-party websites, and then we will typically do a subcategory there. So what are the third-party websites and how much are you spending in each of those? And then we'll look at where are your unique visitors coming from. So that's what we call reach, which is this first thing. Secondly, we'll jump in and we'll say, okay, well, how did those convert into leads? So how many leads did you get from each of these? Were they direct search? Is it organic? Did they come to the unique landing page that's based on your email campaign, for example? Where did these leads come from? And then you break it down to customers. So not much good if somebody's getting a lot of reach and they're getting a lot of leads, but they're not converting because maybe the lead offer is too sweet to pass up as a consumer, and even if you're a non-serious car buyer, you submit the lead. So that's something else to be careful about that this can help us identify. And then here we're looking at all of your different conversion rates. So once you punch in kind of those first three spreadsheets, again, how much are you spending per channel, and we can sort of show you how you can go through this, but essentially you use event tracking and unique landing pages for each of your different lead channels. Then we can show you how many visits did you get, and obviously you already know how many leads you get per channel, and then this whole thing will flow through and you'll be able to understand pretty clearly, okay, this channel needs to be cut immediately, this channel needs to be invested in more, if I spend X dollars, and this doesn't always scale linearly, right? So if you're spending 5,000 in PPC, that doesn't mean that you could spend 50,000 and get 10 times as many car deals, obviously. So, there's kind of some best practices in terms of scaling that spend that, we can talk about too. So, this is a really, really powerful tool. Again, if you want this, again, we give this free of charge, and we're happy to kind of take you through it. Again, if you just want to ping Kia@spincar.com, she can send this over. And again, I think this will make, if you implement this process, it'll make your dealerships run a lot more smoothly. It'll be a lot more predictable in terms of sales and profit, and I think you'll feel more in control than ever before. And again, our recommendation is maybe walk before you run and start with that Vdp Metrics Dashboard if you don't have something like that in place already, and then kind of grow into this. So that's kind of all I have in terms of content. I guess I went a little bit over. It's about 2:50, but I'm still within the allotted calendar invite time. So any last questions? Again, I really appreciate everybody, and I know it can take a minute or two to type in your questions, but any last questions? Opening the floor for any of the sections now. It doesn't need to be specific to just the CMO dashboard, which we talked about in the last section here.
Actually, I've got a couple of them that came in. So you can actually target based on what a consumer looked at. How do we do this?
Yep. So, yeah, so exactly. So, like I said, it's no longer guessing, what did this guy spend time looking at, or excuse me, what is this guy's buying habit? So therefore he's a pet buyer. Now I can say definitively this guy is a performance buyer, a safety buyer, a fan, et cetera, based on what features is he most interested in. And so we can use that to power your retargeting or our retargeting engine to basically serve much better ads that are much more tailored. When you use this data as compared to just even using another dynamic engine that doesn't leverage user interaction data, when you compare that to when you do use user interaction data, we see about 2 to 3 times higher click-through rates and higher conversion rates. So again, with retargeting has such high leverage already, when you can kind of supercharge it with this consumer interaction data, it becomes a really powerful channel. You add Facebook on top of that and all the kind of social echo chamber sort of things that we talked about, you could really start to grab a lot more of those unique visitors that you're already getting.
All right. Going back to spins, does that work on mobile?
Yeah. You may have noticed some remnants. Our company is actually, our sort of general company is called Swipe to Spin, because we initially actually worked with mobile applications to power, like Zappos mobile application, for example, to have this 360 capability, and you would actually swipe your finger to spin the product. So yes, we're very experienced in mobile, and it works perfectly on mobile. So it's, as you would expect, you swipe to rotate the product, you pinch to zoom in, you click to click the hot spots, you click to go inside, same thing on that sort of panoramic interior, all those same sort of things apply.
Okay. On the dynamic targeting, does this leverage Google's display network?
It does. It does. So again, kind of the most seamless way to do this is probably to run retargeting through us. We can look at maybe trying to power other retargeting engines. We've done it a couple times in the past. If you work with us, we work with Google's display network, but we also have direct relationships with a few thousand publishers. What that enables us to do is we have much better inventory. As I'm sure a lot of people on this webinar realize, it's something like 56% or 65, I can't remember the stat offhand, of display ads are never actually seen by a human being. That's because they end up down below the fold where somebody doesn't scroll, they don't load, or there's bot traffic. Because we have premium inventory, meaning it's the top sort of headliner on Yahoo or CNN Money or Yahoo Finance or what have you, you don't really have that issue. Ours is more like 5 to 6%. So Google Display Network's fine and great, and we work with them. Probably 30% of our inventory is placed through Google Display, but we also have direct relationships, which really enables kind of much better ad inventory and higher click-through rates. So.
All right. Well, it looks like that's our last question, Devin. If anybody has any other questions, please type them in. You're also welcome to email Devin or myself, and I'll get you in touch with him. This is Brian Ankney again with AutoSuccess. One more time, if you haven't joined AutoSuccess webinars yet on Facebook, please do. You can interact with our speakers and other attendees there. And I really appreciate everybody taking the time to join us today. I know I learned a lot, and I'm going to quote those reports, Devin. I learned a lot today. I'm sure everybody else did as well. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we go?
No, again, just if you want to, if you have any questions or if you want those reports or what have you, just get in touch. Key@spincar.com or info@spincar.com, and I'm always happy. I live and breathe this stuff, so I'm always happy to hear about a unique approach that you have or a unique problem that you're having, and see if we can't solve it as long as it pertains to kind of digital marketing. So thank you all, and have a great Labor Day. Really appreciate it.
All right, thanks everybody. Please join us again for another AutoSuccess webinar, and yeah, have a great Labor Day. Goodbye.
See ya.